All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ole Miss After Dark. We're back with y'all once again this Sunday to talk about the absolute ass kicking that Ole Miss delivered Georgia in Oxford at 2:30 on Saturday afternoon. Huge win for the program, obviously. Rebels really need to get back into the playoff picture. We've been talking about it for weeks. That this it's do or die time. Any loss completely kicks you out of the playoffs, and the season's a total failure. And after that LSU game, this team's really turned it on and gone to another level. And this Georgia game was a culmination of what happened in Athens last year. I know everybody's talked about it. Lane's talked about it ad nauseum walking out of that stadium in Athens. He knew they had to get a different look, a different type player, or they're going to continue to get their ass kicked against the best in college football. He turned around 1 year later and did the exact same thing to them. The gold standard of our sport just came in and got absolutely dominated in Oxford from the jump. And we're going to dive into all of that and kind of give you our thoughts on where Ole Miss stands now and going forward, because I think that's a really interesting conversation as well. But before we do, bring in my main man, Hitch. I appreciate you joining me again today, buddy.
Yeah, man. What's up?
Man, not a whole lot. Just still riding that wave from yesterday, you know. It's
I
a
hear
big
you.
win.
I hear you. Yeah, hey,
Biggest
before
win
we
in Ole
get
Miss
too
history,
far,
right?
yeah, but before we get too far into it, right? Like, I do want to throw out a plug for the gambling show that we do every week. I usually wouldn't do things like that, but our man Chad Flowers, winner of bets, winner of parlays, is having a pretty good year. And so if you're looking for some picks, you know, me and Dids, we do all right too. We're still chugging along, but if you're not
Still
listening
in the
to it, if you're not listening to it and you do gamble on college football, I would definitely give it a listen. You know, we give out a few picks each week, along with a money line play. And, you know, we're all positive right now. We're all trending towards picking about 57 to 60%. Give it a listen. It's and plus it's fun because we all, you know, like to rip on each other too. So, but yeah, back to the Rebels. A huge win for the Rebels. Man, you said it right. It's just an ass kicking. From the kickoff, even when Georgia scored that first touchdown, we've talked about it all year long. We talked about it with Kentucky. We talked about it with LSU. When we got down, like it was like, oh well, we'll figure this out. It's never been anxiety inducing or anything. And man, it felt like yesterday against Georgia. From the kickoff, that game was over. We dominated that game. That was such a good feeling. Like I didn't have one bit of, oh no, we're gonna lose this game yesterday against the Georgia Bulldogs. It was incredible, man.
Yeah. So the Rebels ended up winning 28-10, as y'all are all aware of now, if you're tuning in to this show here. But kind of like Kitch said, from the jump, obviously Jackson Dart goes out, gets hurt, throws that interception. Georgia gets the ball at the 21-yard line, goes in, scores their only touchdown of the game. It's the only time they had anything going, and the only reason they had something going is because they had such a short field. And then the drive of the game happened immediately after that, Hitch. Austin Simmons comes in with Jackson Dart back in the locker room. And to Lane's credit, to Charlie Weiss's credit, Lane even said it post-game in his press conference that as soon as Jackson went out, he went up to Austin Simmons. He said, hey, you're the guy. Go warm up. Get ready. But just know we're not calling anything different just because it's you instead of Jackson Dart. We're still coming out. Our game plan is to throw the ball. It was very obvious listening to Lane that, and look, again, this is credit to them. They're self-aware enough to know that they weren't going to run the ball against this Georgia defense. They were going to have to beat them through the air, regardless of who the quarterback was. You know, you didn't have Trey Harris again. You know, he was out. And you had all these injuries with the receiver core leading into this game. Ended up getting most of them back besides Trey, obviously. But they plugged Austin Simmons in there. Very first play, give him a naked boot to the left, and he throws a strike. Ends up going five for six, I believe it was. Yeah, 5 for 6, leads that touchdown drive. Really gutsy throw on that third down. That's the one that really impressed me. It was like 3rd and 6, 7, something like that. Threads the needle, coming across the middle right there, gets it just in front of the defender, gives his receiver a chance to make a play. The receiver does make a play for him there. And then they just keep throwing it the rest of the way downfield. I think we ran the ball one time all drive, but Austin 5 for 6, 64 yards, and then end up running it in there with Bentley there at the end. Really impressive though from the freshman. First real action he's gotten in an Ole Miss uniform, and couldn't have come at a better time. It was just big time play.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like you said, Dart goes down. The play before the interception, is where he got hurt. Pretty clear that it wasn't the interception, and then his arm got hit on the interception. So as much as you want to say that wasn't his fault, I mean, it was, but his arm got hit. Whatever. And so I lied. I did just tell a lie a second ago. I said I didn't have any anxiety or anything, but at that moment, when I saw Jackson Dart limping heavily and then going to the locker room, I thought, oh, not that we're going to lose, but things could be better. And then Austin Simmons came in and just quieted any anxiety that any Ole Miss fan had. That throw on third down that you mentioned, incredible throw. Here's my question. This is not a critique. This is someone who doesn't know a lot about the technical side of football, right? To me, it looks like he has a very long throwing motion. And I noticed it on that throw. Have you heard anybody say that as a critique about him or something that he may need to work on? But because I mean, when you think about a quarterback and you see guys, you want to see them up and quick and spin it quick. And it looks like Austin has a pretty long throwing motion. Is that something that is worrisome, or is that something that you need to worry about?
No, that is something that I've heard people question, the long throwing motion. Okay. But one thing about it, and again, I'm not a big technical football guy either. I'm sure I can find somebody to come on here and actually critique it more than I can, or at least more accurately. But he does get the ball out of his hands pretty quick. I mean, it's a long wind up, but when he gets to the spot where he needs to release the ball, it comes out of his hand quick, and it comes out with a hell of a lot of zip on it, and he's really accurate. That's the big thing with him. He's an incredibly accurate thrower. He's got tons of zip on the ball. Yeah, maybe you can do something from the kind of like you said. It's almost like a windup, right? If we want to go back to the baseball thing, which me and you do all the time on this show, right? Because we're baseball guys. That's one thing we both understand to a T. Maybe instead of, like you said, the long motion like this, if maybe you can go from here just straight up to here instead of a wind up, something like that. Maybe that's something that can be done. But look,
I don't know that it even matters, right? Like that's
what I say.
It was that's just something that I saw, and it just made me think, I've heard other like NFL quarterbacks and people like Mel Kiper and stuff talk about this guy it takes it a long time for him to get the ball from here to here, and out. And kid's a freshman, right? I mean, he's going to learn a lot of things, but I didn't know if that's something that you had heard, since I don't listen to a lot of other stuff, if that's something you had heard people talk about. But yeah, we ain't got to spend a lot of time on that because, man, the kid, I mean, 11 yards to Daquan Wright, right? 10 yards to Jordan Watkins, 12 to Caden Lee, right? I mean,
and I think that Caden Lee one.
Yeah,
I think that pass to Caden Lee was the one that we're talking about on third down. I was trying to remember who called it.
Yeah, well, it was fourth down. It was 4th and 1, right? It was 4th and 1.
Okay, maybe it was.
It was 4th down, and it was like a 12-yard pass to Caden Lee. That play right there in a big game, 4th down, right, needing a first down and completing it for 12 yards tells me all I need to know about Austin Simmons' mentality when it comes to right. He's fine.
So let me ask you this, because I say it's a debate. It's not much of a debate. It doesn't really matter one way or another. But in the moment, I'm sitting there watching the game, right? Austin goes down, leads a touchdown drive. You see Jackson Dart come back out onto the field. In your opinion, do you put Austin back out there for one more drive, or when Jackson comes up to you and says, "Hey, coach, I'm ready to go back in, I'm good," do you just go ahead and throw him back in there like Lane did? Obviously, that's the decision Lane made, was go and throw him back out there. But was there ever a thought in your head of, I don't know, maybe let me see what Austin does for one more drive, let that ankle heal up, for whatever they did to it. I'm sure there was a Toradol shot involved, something like that, if I had to
Yeah.
guess, the way he was limping, and then obviously wasn't limping by the time he came back out.
I
So
don't
what
for a
would you have
couple
done there?
reasons, right? For a couple reasons, Jackson Dart is like I have to trust that he's telling me the truth, that he's okay, right? Like that he's not just wanting to go back in, and so he's the guy.
Yeah.
Now, if he comes back to me and Austin Simmons is leading that drive, right? Like the next dead ball, I don't put Jackson Dart back out there for Austin Simmons. But after Simmons, we've scored the touchdown. Yeah, the next drive, I go ahead and I would put Dart back in. If for no other reason than what you said is letting that ankle heal up, I'm afraid what would happen is the more he stands on that sideline, the more stiff and that ankle
tighter.
gets. And so I go ahead and get him out there and get him, doing that. If for nothing else, that watching for a couple of plays, if he fails the eye test, then I immediately go right back to Simmons.
Yeah, that makes sense. Look, I'll be completely honest. I was sitting there watching it with my dad, and once all that happened, I told him, I said, hey, I would leave Austin out there for one more drive. Let him do it one more time. Let Jackson get whatever treatment he needs to on that ankle. But as Lane said post game, Jackson walked straight up to him after coming back from the locker room and said, hey, I'm fine. Lane said, are you sure you can do? Yes, I'm fine. He mentioned that he probably wouldn't be able to do some of the stretch run plays, stuff like that. The ankle probably wouldn't let him do that, but everything else Jackson said he'd be able to do. In Lane Kiffin's situation, I would have also gone back to Jackson, knowing how confident he sounded, or at least how confident Lane made him sound post game, at least that, hey, I'm good. And look, this is Jackson's team, right? This is why he's such a good leader. He's gotten us to this point. He went into that post game press conference against LSU, looking like the dark Sith from Star Wars, right, with the hoodie over, saying, what? Now we've just got to win out. And look, credit to him. He's put his head down. He's gone out there and he's won every game since then. And outside of the first half against Oklahoma, there has not even been a remotely bad quarter out of this team. They're locked in right now. One of the big things from this game, though, Hitch, was obviously defense. We'll get into that here in just a little bit because we talk about that every single week. It's unbelievable week after week after week how they keep seeming to get better and better and better. But first, shout out to this offensive line, man. This was a group that got destroyed all year long. After that LSU game going into that bye week, Lane came out and he said, look, we're going to shake stuff up. We're going to go reevaluate and come out and do some different things. Ever since that Oklahoma game, the start of that Oklahoma game, this offensive line has kept Jackson Dart upright, kept him clean. They've been really, really good in pass protection. And to do it against a defense like Georgia, that's quite a testament to those guys.
Yeah, and I mean it's hard to find like offensive line stats when it comes to protection unless you know what you're looking for or unless you pay for it. So really the best way to do that on something like this is to kind of look at the Georgia defensive stats. And I went straight there and looked at sacks, 1 sack, right?
Yeah. He's been sacked 3 times in the last 3 games. That's it. Yeah.
I mean, and I'll be honest with you, the past 2 games was Oklahoma, Arkansas. I haven't paid a whole lot of attention to how clean he's been kept. But I did last night. I noted, or yesterday, watching the game, about in the third quarter, I remember thinking, I was like, man, I don't think he's been touched.
Not since that first drive.
Yeah, and we were talking yesterday back and forth in the group messages and everything, and I think we kept bringing that up. It's like, wow, it's like this team. Where was this team? But doesn't matter where they were. They're here now, and it's the right time. So.
Yeah. And look, again, we talked about it a little bit. Lane talked about how the game plan was to throw the ball a lot. They haven't run the ball particularly well. You out Parrish. One thing I thought was really interesting yesterday, and me and you didn't even talk about this. I'm not sure it even got brought up in the group chat, but one thing I noticed, especially in the second half, they did a lot more of this. Instead of going with the traditional running back at that position, it was a lot of Jordan Watkins back there, and it was either him coming in from the slot and lining up at running back there beside Dart, or starting to play off there and then moving him wherever you needed to. seemed to create a lot of confusion. The offense didn't really get going the way that you would expect. Certainly not the way it did against Arkansas. But I think this goes back to a conversation me and you had 2 or 3 weeks ago. I want to say it was after the Oklahoma game, if I'm not mistaken. It's time to shift your thought of Ole Miss football and how they can win football games, because and this is something Lane said too. It was funny. He was talking about how his dad, obviously Monty Giffen, that passed away back in July, would have really loved this game because they won it the way Monty would have wanted them to. They played really good defense, obviously. He said it was kind of a mushy offensive game and field goals. That he wanted defense, mushy offense, and field goals, and Monty loves those games. But look, you can do that when the defense is this good. I think we're up to 24 or 25 sacks in the last 3 games.
Crazy.
Princely Umamuyialon cannot be blocked right now. He is an absolute monster out there, and he's getting out so wide with those tackles that Ivy, Pegues, Nolan, obviously Perkins, Xavier Harris had a really good game yesterday as well, had a big play recovering that fumble. I mean, these guys are just everywhere.
Oh, yeah,
it's just plug and play, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be those guys. Even our backups are coming in and raising a lot of hell down there. This defense is on an absolutely whole other level than anything we've ever seen in Oxford, for sure.
Perkins is so fast. I mean, he went around whatever, the guard or the tackle, whoever's on the end, whatever, that guy. Man, he went around that guy one time, and I think it was number 67. And he stood 0 chances of even touching him. It was crazy. But yeah, talking about that, as you were talking, I just kind of went through and I looked, and we had 11 possessions yesterday, right? Take away the one at the end of the game because it was a kneel down, I'm guessing. So take away that, we had 10 possessions. We punted twice, and we had the interception. So we scored on 7 possessions. They weren't all touchdowns. But I think the key is the offense does enough to put points on the board in X number of possessions. Yesterday it was 7, right? 70% of possessions Ole Miss put some points on the board. I'm praising God right now. Sorry. And then the defense keeps the other team off the board.
Oh, it's done.
That's been a real recipe for success. Now, sometimes against like Arkansas, right, we put up 63 where we scored touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. But this recipe really does seem to be working the past 3 weeks for the Rebels is laying on this deep. I sent my daddy a text message yesterday, and I was like, hey, just keep an eye on this defense today because the past 2 weeks they've done this. I sent him whatever it was, how many sacks, how many tackles for loss. And then after the game, I sent him a message, and I just said, told you about that defensive line. And he was like, yeah, it was crazy. It's so much fun to watch that defensive line work.
Yeah, and look, the special teams are all obviously a huge part of what transpired in Oxford. Caden Davis goes 5 for 5 on field goals, including that big 53-yarder right in the second quarter. But look, underrated Frazier Mazine. If you remember, 15 seconds left in the half, Ole Miss backed up into their own end zone basically there. I think we're punting from like the 10, 15-yard line, something like that. Georgia has an opportunity to get that ball back there, possibly get into field goal range with one big play and put some points up while getting the ball coming out of the half. And Frazier Mazine just drops back and launches one 65 yards, completely takes that off the table, forces Georgia to come out, take a knee, go into half. So that was a big play too. That was
Well, it's something that this team does well too, is that other aspects of the team, pick you up when you make a mistake because, Bentley, right, made a mistake there at the end of the half, running out of bounds and stopping the clock, right? But the special teams comes up and picks him up there. That mistake, Mazin punts that ball 65 yards and kind of erases the mistake of Bentley by not allowing Georgia to capitalize on it. And so, that's just the mark of another really good team is when you have a unit, offense, defense, special teams, you have a unit whether that unit is special teams and they muff a punt or they get a punt block, whatever the case is, the defense comes and bails them out and holds them to 3 or gets a turnover. The offense comes out and bails the defense out for whatever reason. So it's a mark of a good team, and Ole Miss seems to be doing this over the past few weeks. Is one unit makes a mistake, here comes the other one to save the day.
Yeah, and this defense ends up with 5 sacks. Perkins, you look at the box score, there's not a whole lot there. 2 tackles, 1 assisted, 1 solo. But
Man,
he does have
watch that game. Go watch the film because he was
but he
monster.
has a sack, he has a fumble recovery, and he hit the quarterback 3 times. I mean, that's a guy leaving his mark on a game. And then Jared Ivey, 2 sacks, 7 tackles total. He was a monster last night as well. And then I'm just going to go off on a limb right here, Hitch, and assume that they have the wrong name in the box score here, because I don't think Aiden Williams ended up with 2 sacks, but Princely Umumnialen did. So I think they just got names mixed up right there. Now, if we're getting 2 sacks a game out of Aiden Williams, then that really changes things here.
It sure does. It really makes me question what Lane and them were talking about shuffling things around. But hey, it's working.
Yeah, that's right. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it, man.
Hey, still on the defensive side of the ball, though, right? It's not on the defensive side of the ball, but it is a defensive player. I thought JJ Pegues I thought he took one last night. I thought he broke through the line and was fixing to take one 40 yards for a touchdown, and I was up out of my seat cheering, man. I thought, he's gone. He's gone. But that was fun to watch.
Yeah, it was. Looking at the offensive side of the ball real quick, though, Caden Lee, 4 catches, 81 yards. Jordan Watkins, 4 for 68. Bentley, 4 for 38. Juice Wells, 3 for 27. That was a big touchdown catch for him, though, to kind of push the score up, go up more than 1 score right there was really big. So that was a really big score for him. Rushing, not a whole lot there. I mean, you look down and we have 134 yards rushing on the game, which is good, but it came from a lot of different guys, which is fine. I don't care how we get it. Dart finishes with 50 net yards after you take the 6 out for the sack. Bentley goes for 28. Dominic Thomas, 24. Watkins, 20. Pegues, 9 on that 1 carry that you're talking about. Rashad Amos got the game, 1 for 2 yards. Overall, though, it's the kind of win that we talked about, like I said, after that Oklahoma game. Take your points, kick field goals if they're there, and put that defense back on the field and let them win football games for you, because if you don't believe this defense can do it now, then there's just no convincing you, because this might be the best defense in the entire country. I think it's undoubtedly the best front 7 in the entire country, because when you also take into account, besides that defensive line, TJ Dotery leads you in tackles with 10. Right behind him, Pooh Paul with 9. I mean, these linebackers are absolutely eating because there's nobody there to block them. The guys in front of them are taking up all the blockers, and those guys are cleaning it up. So just a really dominant performance from start to finish by this Ole Miss defense.
Yeah, and I mean, really, this game more than anything else, if you had any doubts about what Lane Kiffin was trying to do at Ole Miss, right? Just like we led the show off with is last year, this game was completely different. Lane Kiffin said, I'm going to make some changes. This is what I'm going to do. This is where we've got to be. And now this game was flipped on its head from last year. I know that the score isn't indicative of that, because they beat us by a lot last year score-wise. But as far as the game goes, it was just as dominated by Ole Miss this year as it was by Georgia last year.
Yeah, it was just as big of an ass kicking as it was last year, regardless of the differences in scores there. So, hell of a job by this program, man. Huge win. And that brings me to my next point. Ole Miss is now firmly in the playoff picture. Look, we get a bye week next week. We have to travel to Gainesville. That's a place you can lose if you're not ready to play. Ask me how I know. I made a trip down to Gainesville when Ole Miss was ranked 4th in the country back. That's damn near 10 years ago now. We went down there and lost to the roided up Will Greer. They decided to hide that test until after that game was over with. He never played another snap for Florida after that. But that's a game you can lose. Then you get the Egg Bowl. But look, as long as this team's locked in, we have 2 games, and if we win both of those games, not only will we be in the playoff hitch, there's a chance with a little more chaos, because that's what this dumb sport is. There's chaos every single week. Georgia losing Saturday, to Ole Miss, Miami getting beat as well by Georgia Tech. Great call from my main man Hitch there. He told y'all about that on Wednesday as well, if y'all have tuned into the gambling show. But yeah, teams are going to lose. Ole Miss has a chance to not only be in the playoffs, possibly host a first-round playoff game as well.
Yeah, and I mean that's probably something that man, I have no idea. Looking at the standings and whatever, I just now looked at the SEC standings. Right, you've got 3 teams with 1 loss and a whole bunch of teams with 2 losses. That's a knot we have to look at and untie to see what all the different scenarios are. Right, I hadn't even thought about it.
It's really weird from a tiebreaker standpoint. They go through obviously common opponents and stuff like that, where you're only playing 8 games with a 16-team league. There's not a lot of common opponents. I think they eventually start at the top and say who has the best win when it comes from a tiebreaker standpoint. But again, there's 3 weeks left in this thing. More times than not, these things will work themselves out. So we'll just kind of see where everything stands. Because look, Georgia and Tennessee have to play next week. Texas and Texas A&M have to play at the end of the year. I mean, these are games where teams are going to get losses. You're not coming out there with a tie and both teams can't win. So there are losses coming for some of these teams. That Georgia-Tennessee game next weekend is absolutely huge. Georgia absolutely has to win. And then if Tennessee gets knocked off, that gives them 2 losses, and you're kind of looking around wondering what their best win is at that point. So it's going to be really interesting to see what the committee does, not only this week, but as some of these games end up unfolding.
Man, I really like that we have a bye week. I remember when at the beginning of the year, I remember us looking at the schedule and going through it. And South Carolina was a roadblock, one that neither one of us had Kentucky, unfortunately. No. South Carolina, LSU was going to be tough. But I remember when we got to the Georgia game and us talking, hey, if we're in it here, which we both expected to be, I said, this bye week is going to come be at a better time, and now that we're here, we were absolutely right about that, man, because there is not a more classic letdown spot, right, than beating Georgia at home and then turning around and having to go to the Swamp. And I mean, we may get beat if we don't have that bye week in between. So it's great. Yeah, but we go there and take care of business, and then, against State in the Egg Bowl. And God, I bet there's a million different scenarios that we could think through about all of the SEC championships, and that's going to be a wild ride.
Yeah, so. But we'll before we get out here, we'll go ahead and start taking a look around the SEC. What happened this past Saturday? Speaking of Florida Gators, they went to Austin, Texas, and man, it did not go very well for them. Hitch. They ended up losing 49-17, down 35-0 at halftime. There was a time at the very, very beginning of that game, Texas drives downfield, and then Florida gets 3 straight tackles for losses with the sack mixed in there, pushes a field goal attempt back. They miss a field goal. Florida gets the ball back. And for that brief second, I thought, okay, this is how weird games start, right? Things like that happen. And then it just didn't get weird at all. Florida couldn't do anything offensively without Lagway.
Yeah, every time I looked up, Texas was scored again. So
yeah, it was a disaster there for them. So just talk about the Ole Miss Georgia game. Obviously, this was one that Vanderbilt was a trendy pick, right? Getting points at home against the South Carolina team. I decided to leave this one alone because the South Carolina front is so good. And if they ever get going, you saw it against Texas A&M, they can completely control a game just by themselves on that side of the ball. And then
I ended up leaving it alone too.
Yeah. I mean, I could not pull the trigger on it.
I've been on Vandy all year long.
Yeah, I have to. I think I've literally bet them every single week except for this one.
This one just stunk, right? Like it stunk.
hmm And look, Rocket Sanders is really getting going right now for that South Carolina offense. 15 carries, 126 yards, 2 touchdowns. Lenore Sellers goes for 238 and 2 touchdowns as well. Rocket Sanders caught a touchdown, had 2 catches for 52 yards and a touchdown there. South Carolina is really putting it together and getting it going at the right time. And I think we're going to look back as that being a very quality win for the Rebels on the road by the time it's all said and done.
Yeah, for sure, and which is great. Like it's got to be because that Kentucky loss keeps getting uglier and uglier.
Yeah, it does. But and then down in Knoxville, Mississippi State traveled to Tennessee. This is a 20-7 game at halftime, but never really felt in doubt for Tennessee here. End up winning 33-14, setting up that huge matchup next weekend against the Georgia Bulldogs. That's one that everybody's going to be tuned into. Down in Baton Rouge, LSU just got the hell beat out of them. Jalen Milroe rushes for 185 yards and 4 touchdowns. That seems to be the kryptonite of the Tigers, man. Running quarterbacks, Marcel Reed did it 2 weeks ago, and now Jalen Milroe does it here tonight.
Yeah.
And I thought LSU had a real good shot here, but they stuck to a game plan that LSU has no idea how to defend, apparently.
Yeah, I thought they did too. And then Garrett Nussmeier, I don't know, has ever picked up a football and thrown it to somebody in a white jersey. He looked lost out there last night, which was it was so weird to see because he's been good all year. But yeah, he just kudos to Alabama. I mean, good game plan.
Yeah. Their path to the playoff got a lot clearer as well. That's a quality road win, obviously, at night in Death Valley there. That moves them to 7-2, 4-2 in the SEC. So they're in pretty good shape as well. And then thoughts and prayers, everybody, on that Missouri-Oklahoma under. Everything looked really good, 10-9 going into the fourth quarter. And good heavens, there was an explosion there as Missouri pulls it out 30-23 after 34 points scored between the two teams in the fourth quarter. So T's and P's to all y'all out there with that. I think it was like 41, 42 and a half total there. Looking real good going into the final period.
Oh, touchdown, fumble, return, touchdown, touchdown, fumble, return, touchdown.
Just
hold on, let's see here. Oh my gosh, poor guys. Man, I feel so bad for those people that under.
But I feel really good for our man Chad Flowers.
Our winner of parlays, Chad Flowers.
That's right.
Yeah, he had Missouri.
Had to have that one to finish it off. He had Ole Miss, Missouri, San Jose State.
Yeah, I hate it. Huh? I mean, I cannot talk. He is taking a commanding lead, right? Like on the show, But I hate it for that, but I love it for the winner of parlays, Chad Flowers, because man, he's been on a roll all year.
He has. Look, we all did pretty good on the plus monies. I had Ole Miss winning outright. He had the parlay. I know you technically had Virginia Tech, but before you picked that, you said, "Hey, if Haynes King plays, take Georgia Tech to beat Miami outright." And sure enough, he did. And God, I think he ended up only throwing like 4 or 5 passes all game long. They ran it down.
They kept flipping them back and forth. Yeah, it was crazy. It was a fun game.
It was nuts. So fun day of college football, though. Obviously, a big day for our Rebels. Huge win.
Huge.
Obviously, really happy that we got it. Now we get to sit back for a week and watch chaos unfold without having to worry about anything. And that is a really, really good feeling before we ramp back up and travel down.
Where do we go from here? Right, 16 to.
I think we're probably around the 9-10 range, something like that. Because you're going to jump LSU, obviously, since they lost. I'm interested to see how far they drop Miami, right? Because that's perceived as a weaker conference, the ACC, obviously. So I'm interested where they end up dropping them.
BYU.
We might end up jumping A&M as well. I mean, I can't think of a single win that A&M has that's better than us beating Georgia, right? So, but that'll all come out Tuesday. I think they release it at like 6 o'clock Central Time, something like that's when that starts up. Hell, maybe me and Hitch will fire up the old camera and microphones. Maybe we'll do a little bit of reaction once that comes out on Tuesday. That's definitely something we're going to be interested in and seeing what happens. And, everything's in front of the Rebels now.
Yep.
That Kentucky loss, that LSU loss, it's all erased. We're back in the playoffs. All we got to do is handle our business from here out, and we're back in it. So playing our best football at the best time. So that's always good to see this time of year. But we will keep y'all updated on what we're going to do the rest of the week coming up. Obviously, we will do the gambling show on Wednesday, like we've talked about a few times already this show. Maybe hop on, do a reaction show with the release of the rankings and stuff that's being on the bye week. So we will get into all that, and we'll get that information to you once we figure it out. But Hitch, I appreciate you joining me again, bud, and we'll talk to you again here real soon.
All right.
All right, Todd.